beneath the cold gray skies of northern Germany, along the river Weser near the quiet town of Bremen, a monstrous secret was being built, a secret so vast, so heavily guarded, that even German citizens nearby had no idea what was happening behind those thick concrete walls. It was the year 1943. The tide of World War II had begun to shift, and Hitler's dream of dominating Europe was starting to crumble. But the German Navy, the fearsome Kriegsmarine, refused to surrender its grip over the Atlantic. The answer to their survival lay deep below the surface, in the silent world of the U-boats, the deadly submarines that once ruled the oceans. The Allies were sinking German ships faster than they could be built. Traditional shipyards were constantly bombed by the Royal Air Force. Germany needed a miracle, a new kind of shipyard, one that could survive the bombs and continue production no matter what. Thus, Project Valentine was born. Hidden beneath layers of secrecy, engineers, architects, and SS officials were ordered to construct what would become the largest submarine bunker ever built in human history. This wasn't just a building, it was a fortress. Its walls were over 7 meters thick, made of reinforced concrete so dense that even the most powerful Allied bombs could barely scratch it. But such an impossible project required impossible labor. Thousands of men were dragged from concentration camps, prisoners from France, the Soviet Union, Poland, and beyond. They were treated not as workers, but as tools, nameless, voiceless, and easily replaceable. Every day, these men worked 12 to 16 hours without rest, carrying tons of concrete and steel on their backs. The sound of hammering never stopped, not even at night. Those who collapsed were beaten. Those who resisted were executed on the spot. Eyewitnesses later recalled that the air inside the bunker was thick with dust and despair. It was a tomb being built by the living. And yet, despite the horror, the Valentine project advanced at an unbelievable pace. Within months, gigantic cranes towered over the river. Long tunnels stretched deep underground, ready to house submarines the size of buildings. The Germans planned to assemble and launch one submarine every week, each one capable of striking across the Atlantic and crippling Allied supply lines. Imagine it, the Allies would have never stood a chance. If this bunker became operational, hundreds of stealth submarines could have sailed undetected, bringing Britain to its knees. But fate has a strange way of stopping even the mightiest ambitions. By late 1944, the Allies were closing in from all sides. The German war machine was collapsing. Still, the work at Valentine continued. It was their last hope, their final weapon. As the bunker neared completion, the British Royal Air Force prepared something extraordinary, a secret operation that would target this fortress with a new kind of weapon. By early 1945, the Allied forces knew something was brewing along the river Weser. Aerial reconnaissance had captured strange images, massive concrete structures stretching across the shoreline, unlike anything seen before. Intelligence analysts couldn't believe their eyes. What were the Germans building so late in the war, when defeat seemed inevitable? The answer soon became clear. Deep inside that monstrous structure, codenamed Bunker Valentine, the Nazis were constructing a new generation of submarines, the Type 21 U-boats, faster, deadlier, and far more advanced than anything the Allies had ever encountered. These were no ordinary submarines. They could stay underwater longer, move silently, and attack without ever being detected. If even a handful of these submarines had entered service, they could have changed the course of the war. The Allies could not allow that to happen. The order was clear: destroy the bunker, no matter the cost. But there was a problem. The Valentine bunker wasn't an easy target. Its roof was over 4.5 meters thick, made of solid concrete. Normal bombs would simply bounce off like pebbles on stone. To breach such a fortress, the British would need a weapon the world had never seen before. That weapon was the Tall Boy, a 12,000-pound earthquake bomb designed by the genius engineer Barnes Wallis, the same man who created the famous bouncing bomb that destroyed the Ruhr dams. The Tall Boy wasn't designed to explode on impact. Instead, it was meant to burrow deep into the ground before detonating, creating a shockwave so powerful it could crack the foundations of even the strongest structures. On March 27, 1945, a squadron of Royal Air Force Lancaster bombers took off from England under the cover of night. Their mission: strike the Valentine bunker and wipe it off the map. The pilots knew this was no ordinary bombing run. The bunker's anti-aircraft defenses were fierce. Searchlights crisscrossed the skies like ghostly blades, ready to expose any aircraft foolish enough to come near. As the bombers approached the German coast, radar operators below picked them up. The sirens wailed. German gunners scrambled to their stations. But the RAF pilots pressed on, straight into a storm of fire. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave of Lancasters reached the target. The Valentine bunker loomed below, a gigantic shadow by the river, half-completed yet terrifying in scale. The pilots released their tall boys one by one. The ground shook like an earthquake as the first bombs hit nearby. Then, one of them struck just meters from the bunker's roof, penetrating deep into the soil before detonating. The explosion was unlike anything the workers or soldiers had ever seen. The earth erupted, sending shock waves that rippled through the entire structure. Concrete slabs weighing tons lifted into the air. Steel beams twisted like paper. Prisoners screamed, guards fled, and dust filled the air so thick that no one could see a thing. When the smoke of war cleared and silence finally returned to the River Weser, the monstrous shell of Bunker Valentine still stood. Its walls were cracked, its roof torn open, but its core remained, a concrete skeleton that refused to die. The Allied bombing had stopped its construction, but it had not erased its presence. It remained, looming over the water, cold and unrepentant, like a scar the earth could not heal. For months after Germany's surrender, the area around the bunker was forbidden to civilians. Allied investigators arrived, stepping carefully through the ruins. What they found inside was not just evidence of war engineering, but of human suffering on an unimaginable scale. Inside the tunnels, they discovered hundreds of workstations, unfinished submarines, collapsed scaffolding, and, most hauntingly, the remains of forced laborers who had been buried alive during the air raid. Some had scrawled messages on the walls, short notes in Polish, French, and Russian, saying things like, "We will not be forgotten, and tell our families we worked until the end." More than 12,000 prisoners from concentration camps had been brought here to construct the bunker. They worked in freezing temperatures, under brutal guards, with little food and no rest. The air was thick with dust, and many died from exhaustion or suffocation. Every day, trains brought in new workers to replace those who had perished. It was a production line of death, one that remained hidden until the war's end. When the Allies uncovered these details, they were horrified. But as Europe began to rebuild, the world wanted to move on, and the bunker slowly faded from memory. For decades, it sat abandoned. Moss grew over its walls. Trees began to reclaim the land. Birds nested in the broken roof, and the sound of the river slowly filled the silence where once machines had roared. Yet, for those who lived nearby, the bunker was never truly silent. Fishermen claimed that on foggy mornings, they could hear faint hammering sounds coming from inside, like workers still building in the dark. Others swore they heard voices, distant cries echoing through the concrete halls. Some believed it was just the wind, but many locals refused to go near it after sunset. In the 1960s, there were rumors that the German Navy wanted to demolish the bunker completely. Explosives were tested, but even dynamite barely scratched its walls. The engineers finally gave up, calling it too strong to destroy. And so, the bunker remained. Not alive, but not dead either. Over the years, it became a strange kind of memorial. Historians and survivors began visiting the site, leaving flowers and candles in the places where men had once toiled and died. In the early 2000s, a project began to transform the bunker into a museum and memorial, to ensure that its dark past would never be forgotten. Inside, they preserved the tools, helmets, and rusted parts of submarines still left behind. When Allied investigators explored the lower chambers of Bunker Valentine, they expected to find unfinished submarines, steel frames, and rubble from bombings. But what they uncovered went far beyond ordinary construction. Beneath the dust and darkness, they stumbled upon sealed rooms filled with strange machinery, technical drawings, and documents stamped with one chilling phrase: Geheim Reichssicht, top secret of the Reich. The files described advanced propulsion systems, pressure-resistant hulls, and designs that were decades ahead of their time. Some blueprints even hinted at a new kind of submarine, one that could remain underwater indefinitely, powered by experimental engines that didn't rely on surface oxygen. It was as if the Nazis had been working on a prototype that could have changed the entire course of naval warfare. But there was more. In a hidden compartment deep below the main hull, Allied officers discovered equipment unlike anything they had ever seen. Strange metallic cylinders connected with thick copper wires, glass containers filled with a glowing blue liquid, and an array of broken lenses and control panels. The engineers who examined them couldn't explain their purpose. Some believed it was an early attempt at magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion, technology that wouldn't be publicly tested until the 1960s. Others suggested it was part of a secret program code named WWII, or Wonder Weapon, a Nazi initiative to create futuristic machines capable of turning the tide of war. As investigators pieced together the fragments, a pattern began to emerge. Bunker Valentine wasn't just a submarine factory. It was a laboratory, a place where engineers, under the pressure of desperation, were experimenting with ideas that bordered on the impossible. They were racing against time and perhaps even against morality itself. Rumors soon spread among Allied intelligence circles. Some said that toward the final months of the war, several German scientists disappeared from Valentin along with crates of technical material. Others claimed that a secret U-boat had left Bremen carrying unknown cargo, possibly the experimental engines or blueprints, never to be seen again. No official record of that submarine has ever been found. To this day, divers along the North Sea occasionally report wrecks with unidentifiable markings, silent hulks buried beneath sand and salt, far from any known naval route. By the early 1950s, as the Cold War began, both the Americans and Soviets took a deep interest in what was discovered at Valentin. Engineers from both sides quietly visited the site, taking measurements and samples. Some even believed that Valentin's blueprints inspired early submarine technology during the 1960s, including improvements in stealth, hull design, and deep water endurance. Officially, these connections were never acknowledged, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. In the silent darkness beneath the Atlantic, the German U-boat U-557 drifted like a wounded predator. Inside, the smell of oil and fear mixed thick in the air. Every creak of metal felt like a death sentence. For days, depth charges had rained from British destroyers, their explosions hammering the ocean like thunder from hell. The crew hadn't slept. They barely breathed. Only the rhythmic hum of the diesel engines reminded them they were still alive. The commander, Captain Leutnant Schreiber, stared through the periscope. Above him, a convoy moved steadily across the gray water. British cargo ships, carrying weapons, fuel, and hope. He knew the risk. Allied sonar had evolved. Radar eyes now searched even the blackest nights. But orders were orders. Germany needed victories, no matter the cost. "Prepare torpedoes 1 and 2, he whispered. His voice, once steady and proud, now cracked under the weight of exhaustion. The men obeyed in silence. Fingers trembled on steel levers. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then a muffled whoosh. 2 white trails raced toward the convoy. Moments later, twin explosions split the night. Flames erupted on the surface. A merchant vessel began to sink, its hull glowing red through the waves. Cheers erupted in the control room, brief, hollow cheers. Because the celebration didn't last. The destroyers were already closing in. Sonar pings screamed through the water, louder, closer, like the heartbeat of death itself. Schreiber barked orders. Crash dive. 40 meters, no, deeper. The U-boat plunged, lights flickering as pressure mounted. The next instant, boom. A depth charge detonated nearby, rattling bolts loose from the ceiling. One sailor was thrown against the wall. Another shouted, "We've lost power to the aft batteries." The captain steadied himself. "Stay calm," he growled. "They can't kill what they can't find." But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Hours passed. The crew sat in silence, every man listening to the creaks of the metal shell around them. Somewhere above, the ocean raged. Somewhere below, the abyss waited to claim them. Schreiber stared at a small photo pinned beside the navigation table, a picture of his wife and child. He hadn't seen them in 2 years. He wondered if he ever would again. Then came something unexpected. Through the hydrophone faint at first came a new sound. Not the relentless hum of destroyers, but silence. The enemy was gone. The sea had gone still. Against all odds, they had survived. Schreiber exhaled slowly, his face half lit by the dim red light of the control room. "Surface," he ordered softly. The men obeyed. As the submarine broke through the waves, dawn greeted them, a pale sun rising over an empty horizon. For a brief moment, it felt like peace. But above the horizon, distant black dots appeared, aircraft. Allied patrol planes. The war had found them again.